When a building becomes defunct, it is customary to demolish it and build something new in its place. But sometimes these structures are left to decay for years or even centuries. After they begin to deteriorate, these buildings become creepy and mysterious. From underwater cities to ghost towns, today we're exploring 10 abandoned places that will blow your mind. Naval fortifications aren't necessarily unusual. Land-based coastal artillery and forts to block enemy landings and bombardments have existed for centuries. In England, dozens still exist from the Napoleonic Wars and before, although they are now put to more peaceful uses. During World War II, British engineer Guy MAUNSELL gave this old idea a makeover. His forts were designed to destroy incoming enemy aircraft, and contrary to standard practice, they were constructed out at sea. At a time of limited resources and unprecedented demand, the MAUNSELL sea forts could have been regarded as expensive white elephants of doubtful military value. But these unseemly structures guarded the estuary to the famous River Thames and proved themselves very useful during the Second World War. They turned out to be a strategic advantage for the British, who used these forts to combat German bombers as they came to wreak havoc on nearby citizens. And the MAUNSELL sea forts are still intact. They stand as a reminder of the glory and difficulty involved in the Second World War and will likely remain at the mouth of the Thames for many years to come. After several other incarnations, including as a pirate radio station, it looks like these forts are here to stay. The Christ of the Abyss is a bronze statue placed in 1954 on the bottom of the Bay of San Frutuoso, between Camagli and Portofino inside Portofino's protected natural marine area, 15 meters deep. It was sculpted by Guido Galletti, based on an idea by Italian diving instructor Duilio Marcante. The statue was placed near the spot where Dario Gonzatti, the first Italian to use scuba gear, died in 1947. It depicts Christ offering a benediction of peace, with his head and hands raised skyward. The statue was subsequently dedicated to the memory of Marcante. The statue was then forgotten for many years, until it was rediscovered by a group of surprised divers. Since then, it has become a major tourist attraction, and has spawned several copycat statues across the world, including several in the Caribbean and one in the Florida Keys. The dive is relatively simple and shallow, and does not require special precautions. For those not able to see the statue by diving, a recreation has been placed in the Church of San Frutuoso, nearby. Though it was meant to be a symbol of hope and remembrance, this increasingly decayed statue serves as a creepy reminder of a bizarre 1950s art project. The Great Wall of China spans over 5,500 miles and is truly one of the great wonders of the world. The first composition of the wall was erected in 771 BC and stretches from Hushan to Gansu and beyond. However, despite the infamous nature of this enormous structure, there are still numerous areas that are totally unexplored. A 2-year government mapping study uncovered new sections of the wall that total about 180 miles. Adventurers are only just beginning to seek out these unique spaces. For instance, one area called Jiankou winds over vertiginous mountain passes and exposes travelers to awe-inspiring views and heart-racing drops simultaneously. Be sure to pack a sleeping bag if you're partaking on an overnight camping trip. Sleeping on the Great Wall of China feels like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And then there's Wanghecheng, dubbed the underwater section of the Great Wall. Wanghecheng actually means Yellow Flower Fortress. A misnomer. This underwater wall is not what you may visualize, so don't be let down when you don't see part of the Great Wall submerged in the lake. What you will actually see are the remains of the edges of the wall where the connected wall collapsed. The rubble of the wall is underwater. Often called the Atlantis of the East by travelers, the underwater city of Shicheng is a magnificent, mysterious time capsule of imperial China. Stone architecture dating to the Ming and Qing dynasties, which ruled from 1368 to 1912 AD, stands perfectly preserved 40 meters under Qiandao Lake in Zhejiang Province, 400 kilometers south of Shanghai. The lake is still in use as a hydroelectric plant, but its history is far darker. The cities lay undisturbed at the bottom of the lake until recent rediscovery and exploration started in 2001. The early divers found Shicheng to be largely intact, with many of the structures, carvings, guardian lions, and arches still preserved. There have been efforts to map and document Shicheng by divers and researchers, as well as looking into protective measures to prevent damage to it. In January of 2011, the cities were declared historical relics under the protection of the Zhejiang province. Expeditions and underwater photographs have revealed that the city had 5 entrance gates, as opposed to the traditional 4, with 2 western-facing gates as well as gates in the other cardinal directions. The city's wide streets also have 265 archways, featuring preserved stonework of lions, dragons, phoenixes, and historical inscriptions, some of which date back as far as 1777. The city walls are believed to date back to the 16th century. When you think of a sinking ship, your first thought is probably the Titanic. The world's most famous ship sank in less than 3 hours, and 1,500 souls perished that day. But the story of the SS America is much more mysterious, and the tale is rarely told. The SS America was launched on August 31, 1939, and was sponsored by Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady of the United States. The America served its owners faithfully for 55 years until it was finally run aground in the Canary Islands in 1994. At that time, the SS America had been purchased by investors who dreamed of a floating hotel off the beach in Thailand. They'd been thrilled to find a 1940s liner with its interiors intact. Virtually no other cruise liners escaped the century without having their insides gutted and redecorated, but the America somehow scraped through. That means that when the ship crashed on shore, it maintained all of the creepy vintage decorations from the 1930s. Brave souls can still visit the boat to this day, as it slowly rots on a distant beach on the Canary Islands. The Orpheum opened on April 15, 1912, at a very important time in American history. This staple of New Bedford, Massachusetts nightlife was destined to lead a tragic existence. Little did people know at the grand opening that the Titanic would sink on that very same night. This was just before World War I, when the city's mills were busy. The economy was good even though the whaling industry was slowly declining. New Bedford was once an epicenter for culture and arts, and the Orpheum was meant to be its shining jewel. Under the ownership of the French Sharpshooters Club of New Bedford, the building had been open for nearly 50 years, and it contained an armored shooting range and ballroom. The shooting range was used to help train troops for World War I and World War II. The club leased the theater to the Orpheum Circuit of Boston. It not only had vaudeville shows, but once those were in decline, the Orpheum switched to movies. But then the Depression hit, and people stopped visiting this site altogether. Now it sits as a shell of its former self, gathering dust, and is said to be haunted by the hopeless people who once inhabited its happy halls. Nestled in the shadow of the magnificent Mount Fuji, Gulliver's Kingdom was believed to have closed down because of its unfortunate location. For some twisted reason, the park's developers decided to build it in the Aokigahara region, the same area where the Aokigahara Forest, Japan's most popular suicide destination, is located. Also, the nearby Kamikuishiki village is notorious as the headquarters of the Aum Shinriko Doomsday Cult, which also housed a nerve gas production facility. At the center of the park lies a giant model of the novel's titular character, Gulliver, tied to the ground, a vivid imagining of the famous scene where he is captured by the tiny people of Lilliput. As the park has aged, these creepy statues have become even more haunting. From afar, it essentially looks like an enormous human corpse laid amongst a row of houses. The SANZHI UFO houses, also known as the SANZHI pod houses, were a set of abandoned pod-shaped buildings in a suburb of Taipei. The UFO houses were constructed beginning in 1978. They were intended to be a vacation resort in a part of the northern coast adjacent to Tamsui Beach, and were marketed toward U.S. military officers coming from their East Asian postings. However, the project was abandoned in 1980 due to investment losses and severe fatal car accidents during construction, which is said to have been caused by the unfortuitous act of bisecting the Chinese dragon sculpture located near the resort gates for widening the road to the buildings. Other stories indicated that the site was the former burial ground for Dutch soldiers. By 1980, developers shut down production. Site records were subsequently destroyed, only fanning the flames of SANZHI's mysterious demise. By the end of the decade, the once illustrious city of the future was a supremely creepy ghost town. Since their rediscovery, these buildings have gained a cult following. They include features in MTV shows and references within music and movies. They've even become a minor tourist attraction, with several thousand visitors viewing the site every single year. Nicknamed the Hotel of Doom, the Ryugyong Hotel is an abandoned structure looming over the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. It is North Korea's largest building, and yet it remains for the moment unfinished. The building consists of 3 triangular sections, each 100 meters long. The sections converge at the summit, giving an overall pyramidal outline to the structure. It is a gigantic building containing roughly 360,000 square meters, roughly 67 football fields, of floor space. The hotel was originally planned to be completed in 1989, but things didn't go as intended. Poor quality materials, electricity shortages, and a widespread famine in the country all became serious obstacles to the completion of the building. Expected foreign investments never materialized. Finally, in 1992, construction was halted. Japanese sources estimate that over the course of its construction, the project swallowed over 2% of North Korea's GDP, or roughly $750 million US. As the years dragged on, rumors began to swirl about the massive, expensive, unfinished structure. The building that had been touted as North Korea's gift to the world was now a sign of their failure and a massive scar on their power. Though there have been several attempts to resume construction, the building still sits unoccupied, proving that North Korea is in dire financial trouble. The city of Pripyat in Ukraine may not sound familiar, but its vicinity to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant should explain why this town has been abandoned for many decades. It was founded in 1970 specifically to house the workers of the nuclear power plant. Its maximum population was around 50,000 people before 1986, when the Chernobyl disaster occurred. In case you're not familiar, Chernobyl is considered the worst nuclear disaster in history and is only one of 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity, on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan. Thousands of people died in the process, and the surrounding area is still so radioactive that it prompted the creation of an exclusion zone, where no humans are allowed to enter without government approval. In recent years, the area has been open to tourists, and the results are certainly creepy. The walls of every building are coated in communist propaganda posters, and children's toys are scattered throughout front yards. This is a city that ground to a halt in the midst of an emergency and left everything behind. Now the city is overrun with animals like wild boars and wolves. The once thriving metropolis is descending into disrepair and abandonment. In the future, it may slowly decay and disappear completely.